This is your run-of-the-mill, boring video quality test. It's mostly for internal purposes because we want to use the GH5 for our own stuff, but we need to know what it does. So we're going to put it side by side against the GH4, the E-M1 Mark II from Olympus, and then we're going to compare it against the full frame cameras that we have, the a7S and the a7R2, and then I think we'll pit it up against a couple of Fuji 4K cameras, just because we want to see what it does in low light. We're planning a full review of the GH5. We're going to take it on a trip. We're going to use it as a vlogging camera, and that's really going to speak more to its overall capabilities. Right away, we've noticed that the lack of a crop factor in 4K video in GH5 made a real difference. I think it's around 12 millimeters, while the other two cameras are closer to 16 millimeters. And if you've ever had to use a camera with a crop sensor when recording video, it's a real pain because, well, first, you can't ever shoot super wide angle, but if you switch between stills and video like I often do, it means you have to constantly recompose your picture or maybe even change lenses. Speaking of cropping, the GH5 still lets you crop, but now it's optional. They have a digital teleconverter option. We use that in our a7R II all the time, and in fact, it's the reason we chose the a7R II as our main camera over the a7S, because it's so nice to be able to crop in 50% when you're at the end of your lens. It can often mean you don't have to change the lens. You can grab a quick shot a little quicker. It depends how you shoot, but for the way we shoot, we like having that choice. Oh, here's a picture. I don't know, I just felt like I wanted to put some color in there and see if that makes much of a difference. Movement. Now we're testing extreme low light capabilities. They're at ISO 25600. The GH5 supports natively ISO 12800 for video. The other two cameras only support ISO 6400. So what we do is we set the shutter speeds the same, and then we push them in post to get the same brightness. This is a technique we use all the time with the GH4. Even though the GH4 is limited to ISO 6400, it was often better than other cameras pushed to ISO 12800. So we kind of want to see how they push. I wish they'd raise the ISO limit on the GH5 even higher. I don't really know why they limit it artificially like that. It's just not a good shot. It's tough to talk and try to play full. You know what bugs me about GH5 tests that I've seen where they compare against full frame cameras is they always insist on using the same camera settings. I'm just moving this to test, Anyway, when you use the same camera settings, you're not really doing the GH5 justice because you have at your disposal options like the Metabone speed boosters and lenses like the Sigma 18-35 f1.8 that can let it gather more light than available full frame lenses. So that's what we're doing. The GH5 has the XL speed booster, which is 0.65 crop, and the Sigma 18-35 wide open. They don't technically work together, but I've jerry-rigged it so they'll work together by just taping up the electrical contacts. The a7R II is in full frame mode with an f2.8 lens, the Canon 24-70 f2.8. So the settings aren't the same, but we're doing the best we can. These are the fastest zoom lenses that I could get in either of these two formats. So it kind of tells you more about the actual results you could get. This means the GH5 is at ISO 3200 while the a7R II is at ISO 12800. Because believe it or not, the GH5 lens is at an equivalent, is at f1.1, like a literal f1.1, which is close to an equivalent like f2.2 or f2.4, while that's at f2.8. So the GH5 technically gathering a little more light, especially because the a7R II has some pixel binning. This is the a7R II in Super 35 mode where it has a 1.5x crop. We found that gives it similar image quality to the Sony a6300 and a6500 in case you wanted to compare those. It actually has better image quality at 1.5x than it does full frame because there's no pixel binning when you actually crop, and it allows us to use this Sigma 18-35 f1.8. So we can see how it actually compares using a speed booster in the GH5 with that Sigma or using a regular non-speed boosted adapter with the a7S and the a7R II and its bigger sensor. This is the GH5 at f1.1 with a speed booster in the Sigma 18-35 f1.8 versus the a7S, the original, with the Canon 24-70 f2.8. So basically the fastest two zoom lenses that you could buy for these formats. Again, we're comparing results, not equal camera settings, but they're both at the same shutter speed. Curious how this does. We had to use a Shogun to record because the original a7S couldn't record 4K video internally. And that reminded us that the GH5 has a full HDMI cable if you want to hook up a field monitor, whereas the a7S and the Mark II have a micro HDMI cable, which was such a pain. That little flimsy thing definitely ruined some shots that we had in the course of us using it because it just would wiggle loose. So thank you, Panasonic, for putting a real HDMI cable on it. Other huge advantages of that GH5 are it has a touch screen and a screen that flips forward. That's so useful because Justin can flip it forward and show me the shot, or he can approach it from a different angle. If you're a vlogger, you could use it to record a selfie. While the GH5 hasn't been celebrated for its autofocus capabilities, it does seem to be faster than the a7S, and the fact that you have touch to focus makes it infinitely more usable for those of you who aren't doing focus pulling and manual focus. Here's the GH5 versus the X-T2 and the X-T20, and this is not really a fair test because the GH5 has the Sigma 18-35 f1.8 with the speed booster on it, while the two Fujis are at f2.8. You can get an adapter that would let you put that Sigma on the Fujis, and that would give you better, cleaner images out of them. But that adapter doesn't allow autofocus, and this adapter eventually should autofocus. It's having some firmware problems right now, but we expect that to be able to work because autofocus works great with the E-M1 Mark II and with the GH4. Another big advantage of the Panasonic over the two Fujis is the Panasonic has sensor stabilization. So, for example, this 18-55 f2.8 lens that we like isn't stabilized. It's super sharp, but it's not stabilized. So any video you take is going to be super shaky if it's handheld. So either you're always on a tripod or you're getting shaky video, and that sensor stabilization just adds to the GH5's versatility besides the wide availability of speed boosters and adapters. I'll also say the touchscreen on the GH5 helps a lot, and the fact that the screen flips forward helps a lot, other things that we mentioned already. Still, we love the versatility of the Fuji, and the Fuji lenses are great. Here are the same three cameras, all at ISO 12800 and f2.8, and I can't, for the life of me, find that beeping. It's driving me crazy. Good, I got one in. Does that count?